to do. Everything can apply to that. Okay, well, maybe we don't go to baseball games because you can't stay 6 feet away from the guy sitting in the chair next to you. Okay, well, then we can't do that.
Yeah.
It's being logical. It's being reasonable. That's what we are missing right now. We're not logical and we're not reasonable. Everybody wants to. The lunatic fringe has always been out there, James. Always been out there. The lunatic fringe, but now the lunatic fringe is becoming a bigger part of the populace, and the lunatic fringe is wanting to be taken seriously. That's the problem.
To me, I honestly consider Dr. Fauci part of the lunatic fringe, to be honest with you. I'm looking over these figures. I'm looking over, and that's kind of where it started with me, where people thought I was a Trump supporter. I was with the CDC too, and then I started realizing the stuff that they were saying was just not adding up.
But that's what I'm saying. Had they just left it at those 4 data points,
yeah,
we'd have been fine. But they kept building on it. Why do you need to build on it?
Because that's how bureaucrats think.
And that's my point. They have to stop thinking this way, and they have to stop acting this way.
And that was the appeal in Trump originally. The appeal in Trump was that there was this vision that he would create this more pragmatic, more real, down the street level way of dealing with the world in general. That it didn't happen, because he doesn't think well enough and he's not stable enough to do that. But I did identify on some level, because when I'm listening to people and I'm listening to Garcetti, I'm not a doctor, but I'm a person who reads and thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure.
And I don't think I'm smarter than anyone else, but I hate to say this, but I feel like I'm a lot smarter than a lot of those pricks that were commenting on my page, including the people I knew personally in South City. I'll be honest with you. It really hit me how uneducated a lot of the people I've been hanging out with were. And I'll say that, and I hope they hear it. Because just because Donald Trump is messing up and deserves to be removed doesn't mean I believe this crap that the COVID-19 regime, the COVID-19 cult, the left-wing COVID-19 cult was garbage. And I don't care what happens, the way that they handled this situation, calling any woman that wants to go to a park Karen, applauding the police handcuffing a woman for sitting watching a football game and not wearing a mask, is just as extreme and bizarre as the people who tried to break into the Capitol. It's just not as directly violent.
Agreed.
When I look at the figures, as they say, there are 4,000 people. And they keep saying 4,000 people died, but they don't give you any other data. Unlike a lot of these other people, I always break down the data, and that's something I learned from Dr. Sewell. It's almost Dr. Sewell has an art. Thomas Sowell.
Thomas Sowell, yes.
Thomas Sowell. It's it's the art of only basing his things on data. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's what is his art? His art is not going through all this Ta-Nehisi Coates BS about trying to interpret this and that. He just gives you the data and explains how the data relates. And it's a completely different, you don't know, he's not left or right. He gives you the opportunity to understand the information. Now, going through the data on COVID real quickly, they'll say, 300,000 people died, boom, 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 boom. And this is not to diminish anybody based on their age, but let's just be honest about what's going on. But under the age of 25, as of January 6th, you know how many people have died of COVID-19 under the age of 25?
I'm sure
599. 599.
Mm-hmm.
599 people. In 2019, you know how many people under 17 died of the flu?
How many?
643. Okay. So you know how many people were murdered in 2019 under 25? 4,159. That's 7 times more people murdered. Now, if you were to impose this kind of action for the murder rate, the people promoting all these bizarre restrictions would lose their minds. Okay? 32%, so far what I found, 32% of the people who've died of COVID-19 are 85 and older. 32%. Mm-hmm. This is not to diminish people who are that age. But what is that telling you? It's telling you that this is a very age-related, very health-related situation. Well, this isn't the answer. The answer is to dealing with what is causing this disparity. Not, well, we're going to treat everyone like we're going to treat every human being like they have a loaded gun.
Sure.
Which is basically the way they talk about it. They're like, if you go someplace and there's a bunch of people around, you're murdering people. Well, no, that's not how science works.
Well, and it goes to the, again, being reasonable and the 80-20 rule. I'm going to make the assumption that you're not saying that the pandemic is the scamdemic.
No.
It is a real thing. It is something that needs to be addressed. But again, if you go by those four things that the CDC initially said, wash your hands, social distance, wear a mask, and flatten the curve. That's really all. That's all you really have to do.
And that's all you can do.
Right. And
they really don't know. They don't know exactly how people. Here's the thing. I know for a fact, as a person who moved furniture and worked outside, the 6 feet thing, for one thing, is not a real scientific thing. That was an assumption made from one study in one place in another country that was never confirmed. There's no set amount of time. Depending on the temperature, cold germs can last, or virus germs can last 5 hours, 10 hours.
But by implementing something like that, you reduce your risk of getting the virus.
Yeah. I mean that's fine. You reduce your risk, but the 6 thing, they have all these 15 feet, 6 feet. No, it's not that simple. You're right. You don't really want to go to a place with 5,000 people. The same reason why you catch it. But I know for a fact I've been in places where I wasn't around anyone, and I've gone out in the cold and done something, and it doesn't even take 5 or 6 days. I start sniffling, you start feeling. We have these things in the air. They're in dust particles, they're in aerosols, they're lingering. I'm not sure they know exactly what's going on. And again, my point is everything in perspective. The murder rate, the murder rate now is as high as it was in 1970. 1970.
Yeah, and does that have something to do with the mindset of people? I think it does.
I mean, it's the economy. It's trying to force people to stay in. And the fact is that it's the same thing with drugs. It's the same thing with guns. People were losing their mind over me. And what's funny is I'm one of the most social distancing. I wear masks. I do all that. But I'm still going to question what the authorities say. Their response was, well, you're not a doctor. And I'm like, well, one, just because somebody is a scientist doesn't mean they know what kind of policy they should make for the entire country.
Well, and take that one step further. You have a lot of people who are doctors. And if you're a doctor, you're a smart person, because that takes a lot of school. Okay.
Yeah,
and the doctors can't agree. Okay.
No.
Some say this and others say that.
But what they say is the doctors that they say, well, most doctors agree. I said, well, you have no idea, because the fact is that the AMA punishes doctors for not complying. If you go out there and start saying that hydrochloroquine, or if you start hydrochloroquine, or don't wear masks, or whatever, you will be punished and you will lose money. But the thing about it, and it didn't make me like Trump anymore, but it did make me think differently about South City, and these, not just South City, but all these little kind of sort of beatnik communities, South City, AOC's district, all these supposedly liberal-minded places, and they all have the same themes from what I'm saying. I'm not trying to say that the people are the same, but they're dominated by these very ambitious politicians, and they're dominated by these folks who are focused on creating a regime of thought that's very, very rigid. And it's interesting that they depict themselves as progressives and liberals because they're very, very, very strident on this is the rule. You have to call people they, and you have to do this, and that movie's bad because it's a white savior movie. It's so interesting how rigid the progressive left has become, and they don't realize that they're becoming. That's why they hate Ayn Rand so much. I think that's why, because of all of the people I hear that they hate the most. If you say Ayn Rand in South City, you might get jumped. That's how bad they hate her. And I'm thinking, what's funny is Ayn Rand wasn't a libertarian. She wasn't a Republican. She hated the libertarians. She didn't like Ronald Reagan. But they have this association with Ayn Rand because Ayn Rand is the one that they don't like. And I realized, I was just talking to you earlier, I read The Fountainhead. That's why they don't like her. Because in The Fountainhead, what basically happens is...
The Fountainhead, one of Ayn Rand's books.
I think it was her first big book.
Okay.
Is there's this guy named
Rourke. So that was before Atlas Shrugged.
I believe so.
Okay.
I think it was before. Yeah, it was before. It was before Atlas Shrugged. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was 1943. So real quickly, there's a guy named Howard Rourke who goes to he doesn't have a lot of money. So he has to work his way into this architecture school. And he's an outstanding student. He gets all A's in the conventional subjects, math, science, English. But they fail him on every single one of his architecture projects. Every class he gets an F. And it's like, well, why does he keep getting Fs? Because he refuses to draw his buildings in the style of the Pantheon or in the style of the Renaissance, or he refuses to make his buildings look like these old buildings. And finally, the dean calls him in and says, hey, we're going to have to kick you out of the school because you refuse to, when you draw a building, you just build you build a bunch of glass and a bunch of bricks. And Mark says, yeah, I'm building buildings for a particular purpose depending on the materials that I have. And they say, no, you can't use your own ideas. And what he says is every great idea has already been thought. And the masters and the experts and the great artists have already shown you what you're supposed to design. And you need to design that. And Rourke just says, well, I guess kick me out of the school then. Bye. And the guy's like, what? I mean, you can come back in a year if you agree. And he says, no, I've learned all I can learn here. I don't want you. So he gets kicked out of the school. And then one of the valedictorian of the school ends up going to him, and he takes this Rourke, the guy who rebelled, takes his design idea and wins a building contest. So the straight A student that does everything right, and he's making all this money, and Rourke's like, I don't want to work for any of these architects because they're all a bunch of bums. And he doesn't make a lot of money, but he's following his own vision. And I mean, and it's just interesting because Rand basically says the artists and the creative people have created their own regime. They've created their own system of control. And I think that's why liberals and progressives hate a lot of them. I'm not saying all, but a lot of liberals and progressives hate Ayn Rand because they see what they're doing in her work. Because that's certainly what they're doing now.
Well, and it's just interesting because the way the progressive left works is that we need to be tolerant of one another, okay? Unless it's someone who I don't agree with.
That's
it exactly. I mean, if you don't refer to me as the right pronoun, then you're canceled, which is ridiculous. And it's that type of ridiculousness that turns people to the other end. And I think that was one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for whatever reason, people tend to not only discount something they don't agree with, but sometimes they run towards the absolute other extreme.
And I think that's what part of the appeal in Trump was.
I think you're absolutely right. And the thing about Donald Trump that just, I'm going to make this comparison. And dear listeners, please don't turn me off when I do this, because there's a method to my madness here.